Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? I got a confession to make. I miss 2020. And I don't want to make light of it. I don't miss COVID. I had dear friends that died from that disease, and my girlfriend at the time, Megan, got diagnosed with lung cancer and passed away during that year, and it was really hard to see her in the hospital due to the isolation protocols. But you know what? I can't help it. I miss the empty roads. I was an essential employee, and a lot of you were too, and the drive to work was wonderful. My drive that used to take a half hour now took 15 minutes. Was I speeding? Kind of. But the thing is, there were no people in front of me. There were hardly any other cars on the road. And when I went through the middle of town, it was like Christmas morning. Not a soul in sight, not a car on the road. But it was March, and it was wonderful because that happened every single day. There were hardly any people anywhere. When I went to the stores that were open, there weren't people in my way. I could get my shopping done. Yes, there was no toilet paper, but I could get my shopping done without fighting through crowds of people. I live in Connecticut, and it's a small state with a high population density, but I don't live in one of the major cities like Hartford or New Haven. Middletown is essentially a city, but it's not that big of a city, and it's certainly not like Manhattan. In fact, my girlfriend Susan and her two kids are in Manhattan right now to go see, I think John Proctor is the villain, and do some stuff. I would have gone with them maybe, but they're spending the entire day there, and I would rather chew broken glass than go to a city like Manhattan where there are just people crawling out of the woodwork. It drives me crazy. It freaks me right out. And so, during COVID, where there wasn't a soul in sight, it was like heaven. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate people, but it's just having that many people in one place. And okay, well, I don't live in Manhattan, but still the population density here is crazy. It's crazy essentially everywhere on the planet Earth. I mean, the population has more than doubled in my lifetime, which is staggering. And so for a while, during COVID, during 2020, I got a glimpse of what the world would look like with a more reasonable population. And I liked what I saw. And I found out I wasn't the only one that felt that way. I had a good friend that after COVID was kind of over, almost got run off the road by a truck. And she was crying and said, man, I wish more people died during the pandemic. That it was histrionic and over the top, and she really didn't mean that. But I got the idea. We could use a lot less assholes around. And when you put that many people together, well, you get a lot of jerks in one place. And a lot of people in one place, and that bad behavior multiplies. And, well, you see it everywhere, don't you? It's one thing to be in a smaller, more reasonable group of people and identify, okay, well, there's a jerk over here and one over there, and you just stay away from them. But I tell you what, when the group of people gets much larger, the assholes are everywhere. Now, of course, you could say, well, go ahead and move someplace where the population density is much lower. And trust me, I've thought of that. That's still on the table. There was a time when that meant you couldn't get a lot of stuff, but now the internet has made the world a lot smaller, and all of a sudden things are a lot more accessible no matter where you live. There are some downsides, like you might have to drive a lot farther to go see a band you really like, and it's even worse if you're a musician because all of a sudden there aren't that many places to play. I remember being in Silver Cliff and West Cliff in Colorado, beautiful area in Custer County, but they had one bar and it was called the Silver Dome, and it was inflatable and silver, and I think I would get tired of playing there all the time. Outside of playing live music, you could have the objections that, well, you really can't find a job in these more remote places, but of course now you can work remotely. You can even have a YouTube channel or do something else online where all of a sudden your possibilities for earning an income no matter where you are kind of open up. So that is still on the table. But there's still the problem of the population and the overpopulation and the depletion of resources and the logistics of getting everything to people in order for them to be able to live, or even for them to be able to have, find jobs to make money in order to survive. And once again, the pandemic showed us just how precarious things like the supply chain are. We got lucky during that one. We got lucky for a couple reasons. One, the virus was not as fatal as we thought it might have been, but it could have just as easily been a virus that caused a lot more devastation, where all of a sudden a lot of people were just kind of wiped out, and all of a sudden you're trying to figure, well, how do we make things work with fewer essential people? We also got lucky in that it gave us a practice run for what happens when there's a real big disaster. But as you can see, we didn't do that well, did we? Tariffs are giving us another look at what happens when the supply chain gets disrupted in other ways. Like all of a sudden, well, things are a lot more expensive everywhere. But enough of that. Seriously, we're like a monoculture. Just like a disease can wipe out a certain crop, or say pigs or chickens, and all of a sudden things like eggs become incredibly expensive. What happens when all of a sudden we get cut off? If the island of Manhattan were completely cut off, nobody gets in, nobody gets out, how long would it take for a lot of people to die just from starvation? How long would it take before people start eating each other, or at least the rats? Let's make it more realistic. How long would the population of your town last if all of a sudden the food trucks stopped showing up, the gas trucks stopped showing up, maybe the electricity wasn't working because of manpower shortages or whatever else? Not too long, huh? Our humongous population and the specialization of various people and the separation of the various components that keep us alive and keep our lives functioning, that all makes our existence incredibly precarious. But isn't that exactly what you want, Ivan? Don't you want those empty roads? Don't you want the population to be much less than it is right now? Well, yes, and no, I'm not heartless. I don't hate people, but I tell you what, you wouldn't want me to be Thanos or dictator of the world and decide who lives and who dies. And let's not go down that road, but you get the idea. Nobody's going to elect me dictator of the world, and Thanos isn't real. However, there's something else that seems akin to science fiction, which is right around the corner. In fact, it's kind of here, and that is AI and automation. You kind of have to have your head in the sand to not see it coming at this point. And I just watched something today talking about the end of white-collar jobs and the idea that entry-level white-collar jobs are probably going to go away within the next 2 to 5 years. Not only entry-level, but a lot of other ones. We're going to enter this period of time where all of a sudden there's a lot of unemployed people. What are we going to do then? Is there going to be universal basic income or something else? That has the potential to become a really ugly time. The politicians and the plutarchs, well, right now they're all right. But what happens when a huge amount of the population is displaced, when they can no longer be kind of consoled or lulled to sleep by fast food and television? I'm not advocating revolution, and I'm not even really predicting one. In fact, the one thing that I believe keeps revolution from happening now, because the state of the world right now with oligarchy and all that stuff is pretty bad, and the elite pretty much have us by, well, they have us, is, the reason that doesn't happen is because people understand that the first few rows of a revolution, well, they die, and actually a lot more in the first few rows. And the weapons of today are a lot different. The people protecting the people in power, well, there's drones and, modern weaponry. And, I don't want to go down this whole road, but the idea is, for the most part, the population has been kept in check by fast food and television and just making enough to survive and realizing that the consequences would be very, very dire if they tried an actual revolution. But we could be approaching a tipping point where all of a sudden society enters a period of near collapse. I don't know what will happen, but I know it looks a little bit freaky. And our experience with COVID in 2020, when things start to get disrupted, wasn't all that great. Imagine what would happen if things got really unglued. We're really privileged here in the United States of America and other countries like that we don't really see a lot of revolution, but there's other parts of the world where people, that's a way of life for them. They experience that all the time. We're not immune here. We're just in a privileged position at the moment. But that moment may be disappearing. I don't know. Well, I don't want any of those horrible things to happen. I'm not anti-people. I like people. But I miss those empty streets. I miss that peace. I miss that freedom. I miss that tranquility. And I wonder to myself sometimes, what would it take to get that experience again without a global catastrophe? I could use fewer assholes in my life. I could use fewer people all around me. What would have to happen in order to experience that? Not just for me to go move someplace where that's possible, but what about the rest of the world? What would we need to do to get to a place like that without a horrid catastrophe to get us there? What are your thoughts on this? Thanks a lot for watching. I would really love to hear what you think about this topic, what your experiences during COVID were. Did you experience the same kind of thing? Were you an essential worker? Do you think I'm completely crazy or heartless? I hope I didn't come off that way. And, as always, thanks a lot for watching. I'll talk to you later.